What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video, and today we are taking a look at Orchestral Tools' newest library with organic samples called Chamber Strings, or sorry, Tableau Chamber Strings. So this is like a companion library to the Tableau Solo Strings, where they sampled three individual string instruments: violin, viola, and cello. My personal favorite being the viola from that library. And yeah, it was a pleasant surprise to see that they came up with the Chamber Strings library to take the strings a little bit further and, capture the sound of the Taldex Hall again with some string players. And so just to go into a little bit of an overview of this library itself, you'll see here that at the time of this recording, it is 179 euros, but there's an intro offer of 119 euros that ends on July 15th. And in terms of what it comes with, we have a full chamber string section with 5 first violins, 4 seconds, 4 violas, 4 cello, and 3 basses. So a pretty standard chamber size setup. It is on the smaller end of things for a more intimate sound. And you get meticulously sampled unprocessed sounds with dynamic articulations like sustained swells, crescendos, decrescendos, and spiccato notes. Melodic legato sampling with long natural transitions between the notes. So you can see there's a big emphasis on the slow melodic slow melodic playing style, and that's kind of what we're going to go into a little bit in the library. So big thank you to OT for sending me a copy to do a quick review for you guys, and I want to get into kind of the structure of the library and what it comes with, and then we'll demonstrate some of the articulations, and then finally we'll play a little example at the very end that I've put together using the library. So you see it's very simple, comes with the 4 sections: violins, violas, cello, and basses, and in each of the main folders you'll see the individual instrument patches or subfolders. So in violins 1 and violins 2, you'll see that there's a slight difference in terms of articulation selection here. We actually don't have let's see. So violins 1 do not contain the decrescendos. As we can see, they also don't have medium swells, and violins 1 also do not have, let's see, anything else. Crescendo long, we do have there. Crescendo short, yep. So there's just no decrescendos, and then there's one swell missing there. But the other articulations seem to be all present, so we'll go through those right now, and then I'll talk about my personal impressions of them in a little bit. Okay, so for the sustains themselves, you can definitely hear that there's a type of swell and increase of volume into each of the different notes. And it's super interesting because a lot of libraries will instantly have this intense vibrato and a crescendo into the middle of the note very, very quickly right after pressing the note down. So this one actually takes a little bit of time before really hearing the vibrato and the intense emotion in the notes. So it gives us a little bit of time to create these melodic lines. And the slower the lines are, the the more chance you'll have of hearing the vibrato later on in the note. But if it comes a little too quickly, then it can sound a little bit unnatural, you know? So it sounds like by default, the vibrato is meant to, come in a little bit later, which means that if you're playing a phrase that's a little bit faster, then you'll get a more smooth connected line that's not overly passionate or romantic with a huge excessive vibrato. And so you'll only get that effect when you hold the note for a longer period of time, if that makes sense. Let's move on to some of these other ones here. So very, very dynamic, those articulations right there. Now they are not tempo synced, I believe. So when you play them, they are going to play that same length each time. So that just means you'll have to manually adjust a little bit longer, a little bit shorter if you do need, the dynamic to kind of fit your session tempo. So just keep that in mind. Let's move on to the second violin. So go over here, click that. And let's have a listen to this legato here. So overall, my impressions of the sound is that it's a little bit thinner. So that means you do hear the bow against the strings a little bit more, and because there's fewer players in general, it's naturally a more exposed sound, right? So you're not really going to get that same fullness and lush, thick richness from a library like Berlin Symphonic Strings or like a Spitfire library, for example, if it's Spitfire Symphonic Strings or something. And also the legato itself seems pretty well connected to my ears. I mean, if I'm going for a really nice smooth line, then I'm going to want those transitions to be nice and natural and not bump up and down. And when I was just noodling around with it before making this video, I was definitely enjoying myself quite a bit because it was giving me this sense of a real string session just playing these lines, and they seemed to be connected pretty well. So I really enjoyed that. Let's try some of these other ones here as well. All right, moving on to the violas. So, a quick note regarding the vibrato: it feels like it really is just one principal player or one central player that is really digging into the vibrato and giving us that extra emotion. So if the entire section was to go super passionate with the vibrato, then it would sound more like a little like a mess, I think. But it's okay when you have a larger section with, like, let's say 20 players, because then it all blends into this nice homogeneous rich sound. Whereas if it's like only a couple players, like 3 or 4, then it makes more sense to have just one player really be super expressive, because when it's more exposed like that and you have fewer players, then when each person is doing vibrato, but the vibrato is going at different rates, then it's more easily heard that way, and that's usually not a good thing. And also, just a quick note that they recorded these sustains at one dynamic layer, so very similar to their woodwind expansions, to avoid any phasing issues, and just keep it technically more simple for the library in general. And that also eases things up on the CPU. The only downside, of course, is that you have less options in terms of dynamics. But this library generally plays at a quite beautiful, like, mezzo piano to mezzo forte dynamics to me. Of course, the dynamic articulations are a little bit different. The swells, the crescendos, decrescendos, but the actual legato itself hovers around an MP, MF range. So, and the mod wheel itself does quite a bit in terms of the dynamic range. Like, it gives you, of course it's like simulated, but you do have a little bit of flexibility there, which is always nice. Okay. And before we move on to the cello, let's have a quick listen to these microphone positions. So I basically downloaded 3 of the mic positions, the ones that I would basically need, I think. And I downloaded the spot, so a super close one. Tree is a nice balance between, the detail and the width of the hull, the sound. And the outriggers are obviously a little bit more further apart. They give you a sound that's a little more reverberant. So let's just hear the spot mic for the violins here. So obviously, with all 3 microphone positions turned on, the overall sound is a little bit warmer and a little bit fuller to my ears, and I do appreciate how it kind of fills up the space a little bit more. But if you want a nice intimate sound, then I would say just the spot and the tree could do very nicely. So let's move on to the cello, and then we finally have the basses. So now we're on the cello track, and let's have a listen to the sustains. Yeah, it seems like there's a slight bug sometimes. Like sometimes when I trigger notes, maybe a little bit harder, or so for some reason it kind of makes that sustain go super loud. So I'd probably have to, re-record that line or fiddle with the MIDI data slightly, and then maybe bounce it to audio to commit that sample there, and then move on from there. So those dynamics definitely are present, So for me, I rarely actually use these types of samples, the ones that are basically like one shots, because for me they're a little less practical because they're kind of tied into a certain time frame. But at the same time, if you want the most natural sense of dynamics, then using these might be a good option. And of course, having the short, medium, long is always nice to have that variety there as well. And finally, let's hear the basses. So we have the bass track. Make sure the spot and tree are balanced together, and here we go. Okay, so generally, yeah, you do hear that the overall consistency and the tone quality and the passion is really there across all the different instrument sections. And I would say that this library is primarily meant for that slower type of melodic playing, but because it is more of a chamber string sound, you are going to get a slightly thinner overall presence. So what I would tend to do myself, I think, is to layer it in with another library that has a larger section. We'll try that out in just a minute. I do want to show you kind of a quick little sketch I put together just using the legato from each of the different sections. So I'm just going to go back to here and select the legato for each of the different sections. And let's have a quick listen to what this sounds like. And yeah, here we go. Right. So definitely a little thinner, and some could call it borderline synthetic, but I think the synthetic sound really only comes when they're playing a long sustain, but without any vibrato in there. So, naturally when you hold a note longer, like for example, this very last chord, those 5 notes are definitely holding for a longer period of time. The vibrato is not going to come in until like maybe the 2-second mark, So that's where it would benefit if you're going for something a little more lush and romantic, is to layer it in with a library that's a little fuller and more romantic in that regard, where the vibrato comes in a little sooner and is also a little thicker, because then it would eliminate any of that, quote unquote synthy quality. So let me just show a quick example of, what I would do. So let's say, let's close this back up. Let's see what Berlin Symphonic Strings, here we go. So let's pull in the regular sustain. I'm just gonna see if I can add this in here. So it's at the bottom. I'm gonna put it also on track number 1. So we go back up to violins 1, and now we should be able to hear how they sound at the same time. So I'm just going to wait for it to load here for a second. And I actually experimented with this a little bit before, and it gave me quite good results. So layering a chamber string library with something a little fuller gives you that, blend of detail and, fuller texture, right? And they're kind of tuned very well as well with each other. Right, so with the presence of a larger string section, it definitely fills it up nicely. And what I would usually do is layer in something like Cinematic Studio Strings with Berlin Strings before these libraries came out. And for me, that always gave me that sound I've always wanted. But here, the fact that it's two libraries that are recorded in the same space by the same developer and have a very similar consistent tone quality, it makes it a little bit easier to work with as well. So just to give you, a little sense of what this library feels like, sounds like, I do want to warn you, there is a bit of a delay when you play it. So the delay, it's about half a second long to my estimation, when I play a melodic line. I know I'm going to have to kind of shift the notes backwards or set some sort of pre-delay time in the DAW to make sure that the notes compensate, and come in a little bit quicker. But honestly, the fact that there's a bit of a delay doesn't really bother me all that much. I actually enjoy the process of editing the MIDI and making sure it all lines up, suitably. And if the benefit is that I'll get a smoother transition and it's going to be a more musical result, in the end, then I'm all for it. And I don't really see a problem with there being a bit of lag. It's naturally going to happen anyway because the library can't read your mind. So you just naturally have to, accept the fact that libraries have differing amounts of lag. So this one is probably one of the longest I've actually felt, comparable to like Audio Imperia, for example, in some libraries, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to adapt to. And, the fact that there's also a faster legato recorded as well. You can see here there's legato regular in addition to the legato soft. So it does kind of catch up with you a little bit if you do play a little harder on the keyboard by default. So just keep that in mind. But overall, it's a beautiful library and I really enjoy using it. So thanks again to OT for letting me check it out. And I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for that more intimate and closer sound of the strings with a nice increase of vibrato into the latter half of the note, before it kind of loops back to the beginning. If you're looking for something a little thicker, a little richer, a little larger than, symphonic strings, or even the original Berlin strings might fit your bill a little bit better. But this is definitely a more affordable library. Again, it's like 179 euros regular price and 119 intro. And for that, you get these, beautiful sustains plus smooth legato. And it really excels in that. And, the shorts are nice to have, but there's not like a variety of shorts. So, you're kind of stuck into one length of short there, but the dynamics are nice to have in addition to that as well. So just make sure you know what you're getting. Watch the official walkthrough as well. Maxime does a nice job showing his piece off and how he uses the library. But I just wanted to show you a simple context, of a more melodic, something a little more simple, only using this one articulation of legato, and you can make your own judgment on whether you like that or not. But that's kind of like my personal style of writing, how I like to use strings. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Of course, as always, if you want to check out my sample library buyer's guide, it's an absolutely free guide, but it goes over the different libraries that I use on a regular basis, like strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. Because I always get those questions like, what libraries do you use, Chris? And so I wanted to answer it once and for all in a PDF guide. So if you download it, it's the first link in the description box below. Hopefully it helps you out and it gives you a sense of what I like to use, and maybe it can influence some of your decisions as well. But in the end of the day, just make sure you're choosing something that really fits your style and your workflow, because what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, right? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, in any case, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and take care, my friends. Bye-bye.